Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to take some notes on some of the terms that we're going to deal with throughout the entire year. So I'm going to ask you to either take out your Chromebook and go to a new Google Doc and title it AP Seminar Notes, or if you prefer to write, take out your notebook and make a new heading. This way, all of your notes are going to be in one place. So, as we go through today, we're going to specifically be talking about these general terms that are going to come up throughout the entire year. This way, you will be able to have a better understanding when we're going through and I'm asking you to do certain things. So, the first thing that we need to figure out is what is an argument? I told you that in this class, we specifically are talking about argumentative writing and argumentative reading. So, an argument is a persuasive conversation or discussion with a coherent perspective developed through a line of reasoning and supported by evidence. Okay, so in order for you to have an argument, there needs to be a coherent perspective. So, in other words, you can't decide that you're going to take both sides of an argument. You have to choose. Are you either supporting it or are you against it? Once you have that, you're going to use evidence to support your perspective. And you do that through a line of reasoning. So, line of reasoning essentially means how you're getting from point A to point L, M, or N, and all of the different ways that you go about getting there. So, when we're talking about an argument, it's really not about winners versus losers. Okay? Nobody wins the argument versus loses the argument. What it's meant to do is provide a better way to understand other people's ideas as well as your own. So, these terms, perspective, line of reasoning, evidence, argument, they are going to repeat themselves not only in some of your exam tasks, but in many of your assignments throughout the year. So, in order for an argument to be an argument, it has to have a claim. So, what is a claim, you might ask? A claim is a statement that gives the author's main idea or position and is supported by evidence. So, you can't just say because or because I said so. That doesn't work. Okay? So, it's almost like a checklist when you go through this. A claim has to be arguable. So that means that there has to be a position where people can either agree or disagree. So saying that the grass is green is not a claim. It's not something that you can agree or disagree with. It just is fact. Okay? Secondly, it needs to be something that is significant, something that people actually care about. Now, depending on who your audience is, that thing that people care about are going to be different. Lastly, your claim needs to be supported by evidence. Okay? But it needs to be reasonable evidence. You can't just make up something out of the blue and say that it's specific evidence. So, what we need to make sure that we're doing is telling the difference between a topic and a claim. So take a minute and put your pencil down or stop typing and take a look at the examples that I have on the screen. The topic for this argument is single-sex classrooms. That's the topic. That's what I'm talking about. There's no claim there. There's nothing that can be argued. There's no position that's being given. So if we take a look at the examples that I've given you, the further we go, the more specific we get, and then we get to our actual claim. So number one, many schools have single-sex classrooms. That is a fact. You can look it up. So it's either something that you can confirm is correct, or you can say that that is not true. That's all that there is to it. If you look at the second example, it says single-sex classrooms have been around for years, especially at private schools. You can look this up. This isn't something that you can argue. Yes, you have the evidence, but it either is or it isn't. There's no arguing here. There's no different perspectives. Number 3 is what we're looking for. Single-sex classrooms are ineffective because they do not prepare students for the realities of the workplace. This is arguable. You can either agree with this statement or disagree with this statement, and then you can find evidence to support your argument with whichever side you choose. So number 3 is what we're shooting for when we're talking about a claim. What I'm going to ask that you do now is pause the video when I'm done giving you directions and go ahead and open up the assignment in Schoology that is entitled Claim or Not. What you're going to do, either by yourself or in your groups, is evaluate whether the statements that I give you are arguable, or are they too easily verifiable to develop an argument? Meaning, can I look up the answer and is it a yes or a no answer, or is this something that's really arguable? If it's one of those things like the grass is green, that is verifiable, I want you to go ahead and rewrite and revise them into arguable claims. Once you finish, go ahead and submit. Now that you've finished determining what is an arguable claim or not, we need to figure out the other, quote, perspective part of an argument. You can't have a one-sided argument. What you have to do is take into consideration the opposing viewpoint or the opposing perspective. And that is what we call the counter argument. The counter argument is the other side of the perspective, idea, or theory. So if we go back to this statement, single-sex classrooms are ineffective, if my argument is that they are ineffective, then the counter argument is going to be that they are effective. Then we take it one step further with our rebuttal. Our rebuttal is contradicting an opposing perspective by providing an alternate, more convincing evidence. So it's almost as if you're ping-ponging back and forth. So if you think about it in terms of a courtroom, you as an attorney are going to question your witnesses. You are going to state your argument and your client's perspective on what happened. The other attorney for the opposing side is going to then offer their reasons to try to tell you why you, as that attorney, are wrong. After they do that, you have another opportunity to go back and restate and give more information proving why you are correct. That is the rebuttal. So the last part is when you refute that opposing perspective by providing more counterclaims. Okay? So take a minute and process that before I give you an example. So let's take a closer look at what these pieces are. So the first thing that you're going to see in most arguments, and specifically in most of the articles and the sources that we read, there's going to be an introduction, followed by background information, a claim, then a counter argument, and a refutation or rebuttal, and then lastly, a conclusion. So when we're specifically talking about an introduction, the purpose of the introduction is to keep the audience's attention and to state or imply the thesis statement. So we're not going to start essays that are saying, today I'm going to talk about blah, 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 blah. The Book Thief is a story about, I'm already falling asleep and you haven't even finished writing a sentence yet. So the purpose for an introduction is to keep the author's the audience's attention. So how are we going to do that? We're going to spend a whole lot of time in a couple of weeks talking about this in much more detail. But the key to this is to make the topics relatable. If I don't care about what you're talking about, then I'm not going to listen. Or in this case, I'm not going to read. So we tell anecdotes or shared experiences so that the audience is invested in what you have to say. Another way that we keep the audience's attention is by establishing a sense of urgency, using some sort of outstanding statistic or using really dramatic descriptions in order to draw attention to this issue right now. Like, why do I have to deal with this immediately? Why can't I wait until I'm 37 to deal with this? Why right now? Then the last option is to grab the reader's attention by challenging common conceptions. Okay, and you might use some interesting or unexpected cause and effect, maybe some kind of current events if that applies, etc. So if you think about it, what we are doing right now is giving the background information. This is to make sure that you as the writer and the reader are on the same page. So you're going to define key terms. For example, if you're talking about something regarding the frontal cortex of the brain, you probably need to tell me where the frontal cortex is and what purpose it serves and how it helps humans function if you're then going to be talking about it throughout your paper. You want to establish this context because you're showing me or whoever else is reading why your topic matters. Okay? You might then provide some factual information just so that the reader has an idea of what you're talking about. Then we get through to the nitty-gritty, okay? Your claims. We're going to follow a specific pattern throughout the year writing all of these claims, all right? They're little itty-bitty arguments throughout your paper that you then offer evidence and then explain why it proves your point. So if we're going to argue if I'm giving you the topic of wings, chicken wings, and we're going to decide and argue which one is better, the flats or the drumsticks, okay, you might tell me that your claim might be that the flats have more actual chicken on them than the drumsticks. And you might find some sort of evidence that, some sort of statistic that gives the average weight of a flat chicken wing versus the average weight of a drumstick. And that's going to help prove your point that one has more chicken than the other. So then when we get to the counter argument, that means that you're acknowledging the other side. So if I'm arguing for the flats, my counter argument is going to be something like, well, drumsticks are much larger in size, so they're going to have more chicken or more meat on them. So you have to take into consideration the other side. Oops. If we get into the refutation and the rebuttal, that's where you say that your ideas are better. So if we're talking about this idea of wings, the claim might be that flats are better than the drumsticks, and I might give specific evidence about the average weight of the flats versus the drumsticks. My counter argument might be that when you look at them, it's going to appear that the drumsticks have more meat on them than the flats. But in reality, the weight of the bone for the drumstick weighs more than the weight of the bone for the flats. So it's ping-ponging back and forth with your argument, taking into account the other side, and then reminding everybody why you are right. So then the last part of all of this is the conclusion. This is where you bring your argument to a close. This is where you say to the reader, if you listen to what I'm saying and you do what I'm saying, then this positive thing will happen. If you don't listen to what I'm saying and you don't follow my directions, then this negative thing is going to be the result. So in other words, you just talked to me and argued for 8 pages. So now what? What am I supposed to do? Make sense? So what you're going to do now is go into Schoology, and you are going to read an article and identify these pieces of the argument in the article. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions or issues.